by offering a queen trade.
Yeah, interesting. I guess white is counting on his space advantage in this position because certainly black is very solid. But white's pawns are on the fourth rank. They might be pushing towards e5, that pawn. That's certainly an idea. And there's also constantly an idea of knight a4, but it's not so dangerous for now because black can move their queen to a5.
So I'm gonna say I really like Erigaisi's position. I don't like the fact that Aronian has given himself these doubled pawns. I feel like they can be a weakness in the long term.
Yeah, black definitely doesn't want to trade on e4 and undouble those pawns because then white would have an edge. So Aronian plays rook b1, I think a very logical move, and I've been thinking about this plan with b4 and then either knight a4 at some point or just b4, b5.
And Erigaisi tries to stop this by placing his queen on that b4 square, preventing white's pawn from moving forward, but also forcing the exchange of queens. And I don't understand how that could come as a surprise for Aronian. That was obviously what the Indian player was wanting to do. And Aronian actually allowing a second pair of pawns to be doubled. Aronian is saying that go ahead, trade queens. Yes, I'm getting doubled pawns, but I'm also opening up for my rooks pointing down the board.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all that Erigaisi decided not to trade on a3. He doesn't need to. He's got that queen trapped, and so he's just going to be improving his position. You can see that Aronian is getting ready for the end game as he's bringing his king towards the center.
And now that trade has been made. Vronya now saddled with two doubled pawns. One of them on the side of the board, the other two in the middle. The advantage of this strategy is that he has his rooks pointing down towards black's positions.
Yeah, and it's undoubtedly black's pawn structure is a lot more solid, and Erigaisi is playing quite quickly and confidently. On the other hand, his knight on a6 is a little bit out of position. It currently cannot really move off the side of the board. So, his decision to capture on a3, it's something that can be debated.
Yeah, no, actually, I thought this was going to be a really, really good position for the Indian player, but we can see the eval bar on the left side having more white than black, saying that Aronian has a slight advantage despite those glaring weaknesses with the pawn formation.
And Aronian is saying with his last move that he wants to double up on the b file and pressure the exposed pawn on b7. That is going to be quite annoying for black to defend because no one wants to just keep their rooks passive defending their weak pawns. And Erigaisi goes knight d7, probably with the idea at some point to play b6.
So he's trying to make exchanges, but in doing that, he's being forced to move his pieces back. We're approaching the stage of the game where both players have just over 1 minute on the clock. This is where all the drama and mistakes happen.
Yep, that's right. And so I think this has overall gone pretty decently for Aronian. He seems quite confident in his body language, but Erigaisi, we saw him defend a position that was also unpleasant against Magnus yesterday. So I don't think he's going to be feeling too nervous in this situation yet.
And Aronian taking his time with the decisions here, pushing pawns forward on both flanks. Aronian's strategy this entire game has been being aggressive with his pawns.
Yes. And Erigaisi switching his rooks over to the A file to target the pawn on A4. Maybe one day the knight from A6 will actually move somewhere. I'm hopeful for that knight to finally get off the edge of the board, but it's not clear where he would actually be much more effective.
Erigaisi getting both his rooks on the side, trying to point down towards white's pawn there. It's not clear how Aronian is going to break through here, and that's costing him a lot of time on the clock. 40 seconds now for Aronian with 55 seconds for Erigaisi.
Yeah, let me just give you a little update on another really important game. Asobayeva, she's going to win against Koneru. I mean, she has got a completely winning position. It's going to be amazing. I mean, this young player getting the silver medal in the World's Rapid, and I mean, she's just positioning herself to convincingly win the gold medal in the Blitz.
Amazing performance from the Kazakh youngster. While we're watching Aronian having to deal with a very big trouble on the clock. However, his position is looking okay as he continues the strategy of pushing pawns further and further forward. Aronian now continuing with his pawn on the right hand side. That's not going to be the last of it. He's going to get this other pawn involved as well. Aronian down to just 20 seconds while Erigaisi has 33.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Erigaisi's last move is about repositioning the knight to e6 and also possibly playing f6. Yes, he finally kicked out that knight from e5. I think that's a good thing. Although white still has these impressive pawns on the 6th rank. You never know in an endgame, the more far advanced your pawns are, the more tactical chances they're going to give you. So that pawn being on g6 is, I think, a very good thing for white.
Yeah, and Aronian now going to get his rooks into an attack here. Look at the eval bar on the left side. It's almost completely white as Aronian is putting pressure on his young opponent. He's trying to make inroads with his rooks towards the black pawns.
Yes, perhaps. I don't know if that lining up on the c-file. Will he be capturing on g5? Yes, he did, and he's invading with his rooks to the 7th rank. He is going to win that pawn on g7. The knight is getting kind of dominated, and that g6 pawn that we mentioned earlier might just be the decisive one.
It is. It's 2 squares away from becoming a new queen, and there are no black pieces in the vicinity to stop it.
Yeah, so he's got the knight in under attack right now, threatening pawn to g7. Okay, what does he do with the rook on c1? How is he going to get that rook into the game? Oh, he answered that question. Rook h1.
He's trying to bring all the pieces into the attack. Erigaisi tries to give away his knight just to make some trades here with that white rook. And he's getting his king closer to that dangerous white pawn, trying to defend himself. Aronian, we can see on the photos, pushing that pawn forward. But for now, the black rook takes out that important white pawn. Aronian shifting his focus over to the left-hand side, capturing a pawn there. Aronian now up 2 pawns, but one of them is doubled and not going anywhere in the middle. Aronian gives away his pawn on the left side in order to take the pawn in the middle instead. Aronian with 2 pawns extra, but he has those pawns are doubled, so it's not clear it's that big of an advantage. In fact, Erigaisi manages to capture one of those pawns. We're in a rook end game now with 2 pawns for Aronian and 1 pawn for Erigaisi.
Wow, what a position Erigaisi is defending. I mean, he was completely losing before. This one seems like a dream. Even if he does lose this endgame, it's still a very good thing that he managed to get himself this far. As we know, rook endgames are the most drawish kind of endgames in chess, and a 1-pawn advantage is not a guarantee of a win at all.
And Erigaisi forcing Aronian to always move his rook back and forth. Aronian, in order to win this game, he's going to need a new queen. So he pushes his pawn forward in the middle. Aronian down to just 5 seconds on the clock. He needs to make sure he doesn't lose this game on time. And going back and forth with the rook, Aronian still searching for chances to win this.
Yes, it's a little tricky for Aronian to advance that pawn. As you see, the rook on d1 is well positioned, preventing its advance, and black is constantly going to be using checks and attacks on the g4 pawn for some kind of counterplay. So far, can he go king g5? Can he try to win the pawn? Yes, he is. He is trying to win the pawn on g4. And can he capture it now with a check? No, he decides not to. He gives a check from a different direction. Will he now be taking that pawn on g4? Okay. Pawns are even. White's pawn is further advanced, but black should be having enough to promote his pawn as well.
So Aronian trying to figure out, can he get a new queen? The answer is probably yes, but the fact is that black is looking good to get his pawn across as well. Aronian does get a new queen, but they agree to a draw because Aronian realizes that even though in this final position he will be capturing the black rook, he will be up a rook for a pawn, but that pawn will be moving forward, and the white king is not in time to stop the pawn from becoming a new queen. And we would have had king versus king situation at the end there. And that was an 80 move game. To sum up this round on the screen, we have the results of the other games. Dubov winning again, making his presence known up top. Dubov is now going to be the number 2 placed player, and he's going to be 1 point behind Aronian, who remains in the lead after this draw.
Yeah, we also have some big results in the women's. As we mentioned earlier, Asobayeva took down Humpy Koneru, and Vaishali, though, from India, getting some points for Team India against Alexandra Garyachkina. That's a big win. So we have a lot of Indian players at the top, right? Even though Koneru lost, she's still in the leaders group. And Kostyanyuk loses again to Gunina. Kashlinska finally rising. This is a strong player from Russia that we just haven't seen much of in these events, but now she's on board 4 and winning, so I guess we will be seeing more of her games. And Abdumalik from Kazakhstan also winning.
So those are the results of this round. In the open section, we see some of the big names coming back. We've been missing them in the top. Players such as Vasyl Agrav, such as Nepomniachtchi, such as Karyakin, making inroads to the top 8 boards. However, Karyakin, a former champion, he loses against Mamedyarov, getting knocked back. Grischuk, also a 2-time Blitz champion, he loses to Nepomniachtchi, and the big names thereby kicking other big names down the leaderboard. And speaking of leaderboard, this is the situation of Aronian having excellent chances to win that game. Could have held on to his 1.5 point lead, but with Dubov winning, that lead has now been cut down to just 1 point. We'll be coming back. Sorry?
Oh, I was going to say, there's a new player I'm excited about, Yoon Erigaisi. I think... I'm his new fan. He's only 18 years old. I mean, he's drawn Levon Aronian, Magnus Carlsen, both with the black pieces, and he can really handle himself in difficult positions. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of his games in this tournament.
And we will do just that after a break.
Lepaskan kekuatan dari kerajaan binatang dengan figur